Welcome to the Deep Leadership Podcast. Today I'm joined by Dave Nordell. Dave is a retired United States Air Force Command Chief Master Sergeant with over 30 years of service. He served as a medic in Saudi Arabia, Somalia, South America, Iraq, Korea, Japan, and Hungary. He grew up in rural Northern California in a dairy farming community, and he's the author of a new book called Giving Back, Life and Leadership from the Farm to the Combat Zone and Beyond. And I am excited to have him on the show to talk about the idea of giving back as a leader. So Dave, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks, John. It's great. Great to be here with a Navy guy.
Yes. Yeah, we love all the services. We've got a lot of Air Force folks on here too. So we're happy to have you. And I'm really excited about learning from your background, your history, and kind of this book, because I think it's a powerful message in there and I really want to get to it. But first of all, tell us about your upbringing, because I think it's unique as you grew up in a dairy farming community on a farm. And then you decided to join the Air Force at 19. So tell us a little about the early days and why you went into the Air Force in the first place.
Sure. Well, the early days were all shaped. My family immigrated from Portugal to the far northwest of California. And after World War II, my grandfather bought more property in the top of the Central Valley or the Northern California Valley, dairy farming. So as a little kid, I spent a lot of time. My dad left when I was young, so it was just me and my mom. And I spent an awful lot of time out on the farm. And I even as later on in life, and as the book kind of relates, you don't realize that almost everything you need to know about life and leadership is all there on the farm. And it starts, the animals teach you a lot, but the work that's necessary and the planning and the critical thinking skills that go along with those type of things, having a lot of empathy and patience and learning to overcome adversity, celebrate when you get the victories, and understand that you need help and how to ask for help and those type of things. So that farm experience, life and death is all right there in front of you. So that farm experience, I wanted to go in the Navy. We talked about it. I wanted to go in the Navy, and the recruiter, the nicer recruiter on the day was the Air Force guy. So I ended up in the Air Force, and I wanted to go in the Air Force and be a plumber. And the Air Force said, no, you probably need to be a medic. All of those were great decisions. As far as I'm concerned. So I waited a year out of high school. I waited a year. I was on delayed enlistment. So I started in the Air Force at 19, and then off we went. And the leadership lessons from the farm probably started right there in basic training. And I also learned that I had some growing up to do based on kind of who I was and what I was bringing into a very multicultural environment. And so I started learning from people around me too, which is a huge key leadership trait, right? You don't know everything. You got to find a smart person.
Yeah, interesting. We talked a little bit off the air, but when you go in the military, people don't realize that it's just this diverse group of people from all over the country with every different religion, ethnicity, region of the country, dialects, and in our case, they locked us in a metal tube for 3 months at a time, but. Yeah, so you have to adjust, right, to being around, if you grew up in one particular area of the country, and you're suddenly around people from Alabama and people from New York City. And so what was that like for you, kind of making that transition into, being around a wider group of people?
Yeah, tough chapter for me to write in the book. And if people want to absorb that, as I was telling you earlier, I was thrown into diverse, equitable, and inclusive environment right off the bat. And I was lucky. I had some proficiency advanced Army guys that were doing an abbreviated version of Air Force basic training. But the majority of my flight, the majority of them came from upstate New York and inner city Philadelphia. And I'm coming from a town. I graduated with 125 kids that came from 5 different counties. And so we had, you had social norms, and you had a vocabulary and those type of things. And I found out really quick that words in my vocabulary and things that were normal back at the hometown kitchen table weren't.
Yeah.
And my journey in leadership started right there with a lot of understanding, patience, and empathy from some people that kind of started to explain things to me. And I made a decision on that day that if I didn't know something, I was going to go and find out. And if I didn't know somebody's story, I needed to know it, because I wasn't going to be a good teammate, a good follower, and later on a good leader unless you know people's story. And you have to know what
Yeah.
makes them tick. Because as you know, you lock yourself up in a submarine and not everybody's motivated by getting a shot at the treadmill. They want to do something else. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So you had a long career, 30 years or so. Tell us just some of where what you did and where you went, because it's I covered a little bit in the intro, but you had a long history. And the other thing is, as you describe it, talk to me a little bit when you felt like a shift where, and a lot of one thing I like about the military is you start out as a doer, and then you're lead you gradually move into leadership. And what was that transition like to you? And when did you feel like, oh, truly, I am a leader now, and I'm doing more leading than I am doing? Because as an E9, you're doing much more leading than you are doing. So maybe tell a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah. So, I started as a straight leg medic. In fact, they made me a leader in basic training. I didn't know I had any traits. I don't know. Maybe they saw something. Maybe I was just the tallest guy in the flight and I got the job. I have no idea. Um, I started off my first job. I went to Spain and my first job was delivering babies
Mhm.
and working on an OB floor. And you can get an awful lot of responsibility as a young person, but when somebody in those delivery rooms, my job was the baby. So when the baby came out, the doctor handed me the baby, and I had to do all things baby. Give it enough oxygen, score them, do all the fancy scores that go along with how healthy they are, get them warm, do all that type of stuff. Um, you start to become a critical thinker right there on the spot. Now,
Mhm.
I had seen a lot of animals born, so it wasn't unusual to me. So you kind of progress and you're leaning on leaders, but I'll tell you, you're going to laugh about this because that was my first assignment. I was a young airman. I had one stripe. When I left there, I had two stripes, and I probably had one stripe on my sleeve. And I remember they had moved me to the emergency room, and I stayed in the emergency room forever. That's what drove me to go to nursing school and become an ER nurse and to do that shock trauma stuff. And my non-commissioned officer in charge got sick,
Mhm.
and I kept walking by his office, and there was all this paperwork laying on his desk, and he's upstairs, and I'm thinking to myself, well, nobody's doing his job. What's the deal? I had no idea what I was doing, John, but I sat down and I made 3 piles of papers,
Mhm.
things that I thought that were irrelevant, things that I thought that somebody else needed to look at in the next week, and things that needed to go upstairs to his hospital bed for him to sign. And I grabbed another senior NCO out of the hallway and I said, hey, I kind of did this. What do you think? And he goes, well, I guess you're just the AIC, the airman in charge. And off he went. And so I started, and I got a lot of praise for doing that. But I started to find out that if you're going to take the initiative and get in front of things, you can lead from any spot.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so as I graduated through the ranks, as I was moving up, and I got different jobs, and as I told you, they sent me to independent duty school. And on the submarine, the doc does a lot of stuff, and we did too in the Air Force. And then you're out, and then you're the when you're in the jungles of South America chasing around drug runners, you're the doc and you're the senior medical advisor, and you're sitting on
Yep.
those executive teams, even though they're small, and you're making those executive decisions. So I think in my formative years, I was leading. I didn't know how. I made some mistakes, and I had some mentors. Mentorship is a huge piece of this. I had some mentors that kind of picked me up and moved me down the line, all the way to my last job. I had 3 command billets, and my last job was a command chief at 20th Air Force. And so now you're leading nuclear forces and missile leaders and a lot of cops and all the adjuncts that go along with that and the bases. And then you're right back to the lessons of basic training and that large, diverse group. And, in the book, I talk a lot about you don't know what you don't know. So you better not waste your time and go find out, wondering, don't sit around wondering. Because once you get to know somebody's story, you can build some respect and you can actually make some really good decisions, change lives. And I had the opportunity to do that. So it's great.
Yeah, I really like what you're saying there, because that's a big part of leadership is connecting and getting to know people and knowing, there's no cookie cutter approach to leadership. If you know your people and you know what motivates them and where their issues are and where their hopes and dreams are, you can lead them a lot better than if you're trying to do one size fits all. So yeah, that's something I definitely learned over the years as well. Yeah.
That's the adage, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care about them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you
And that's,
shut your mouth and listen. That's his
yeah.
first step in leadership.
Well,
Yeah,
that's in the book, right? I had my lesson with that
absolutely.
too.
So let's
Yeah.
talk about this new book. It's called Giving Back: Life and Leadership from the Farm to the Combat Zone and Beyond. Now, who who did you have in mind when you wrote this book?
This is going to sound so cliche. I actually, in my head, I had everybody in mind, because I didn't want to write to young airmen, today's airmen, and I didn't
Right.
want to write. I didn't want to write to the mid-level manager and all the all the kind of the categories we put people in. But really, my thought processes were is my grandfather was a giver. He died young. He died at 65. He was a giver, and he found a magical way. People just gravitated to him because he didn't. He didn't hoard the gifts of life. He knew that it needed to be given back. And so in my time on earth, as people will say, sometimes they're like, wow, you kind of live the lives of maybe 2 or 3 people. And I don't know if that's the case, but life has taken me in a way that I've got to experience a lot of things. And so why wouldn't you write it down, or why wouldn't you share it? And so I think that the population that this is resonating the most with is somewhere between 7th grade and geriatric millennials. And
Mm,
it's these people that are hungry for those little tidbits of clues to be introspective. And I think people that just need a regrounding, the book is there. It just kind of drags you back to the basics. The basic things that we need to take care of ourselves on a day-to-day basis. You're a workout guy, and you take care of your physical piece. That's important.
yeah.
And the people that you keep around you, and those type of things. And so, that's what the book is there for. I think anybody can read it. I'll give you an example. My 88-year-old mother read it, called me in tears, and said, "You wrote this book 40 years too late, because I should have had it back then."
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's great. And I think, it sounds like you were motivated similar to me, which was, I wanted to, we're going to talk about this. I wanted to give back, right? I've been blessed with an extraordinary life as well, and got to do some amazing things. And I want to share that wisdom. I want to share my experiences. I want to help the next generation of leaders, maybe not make the mistakes I made, and here's a few little shortcuts that I learned from 30 years of doing this. Right. So I think, probably some of that was your motivation, well, as this idea of giving back. And let's talk about that. So the book is called Giving Back. So why is giving back so important, and who should give back? Are we talking leaders? Are we talking everyone? Tell us a little bit about, like you mentioned your grandfather, but what does it mean by giving back?
Sure. So as we travel through life and we have experiences, we have some similar experiences, I think, John, when we're, all these things we've been talking about, you're exposed to certain people, certain situations, certain cultures, certain traumas that shape you, that are all kind of inside of you. And I look at each and every one of those as a gift. And so you can hoard the gifts. You can just keep them, right? And they can be
Mm,
yours, and you can sit on the chair, and the only person that ever gets to hear it is maybe your great grandson, when you decide to spill it all in your last moments on earth. Or you can share the gifts. I think in the book, one of my one-liners in there is knowledge is power only when shared.
yeah.
And we can know a whole lot about a lot, John, and we can actually tell people I'm really smart, or pound our chest. But I think that the power, the really smart people, and the people that are really involved in growth and development of our world, and the people in it, are the ones that give back the gifts. And so in that book, and I preface it at the beginning, there's nuggets in there. And if somebody just gets one nugget out of the book, then the book is a success. And I haven't, I've had people call me that I haven't seen for 25 years, that have read the book and said, "This is amazing, because you've pulled me back, you've regrounded me into places that I have kind of strayed away from." And so
Yeah.
some of it's very simple and some of it's complex, but yeah, I think it's our responsibility.
Yeah.
I do. I do. As we grow older, this is a finite gig, life. And so I just would just soon leave it all out there.
I, I love it. I understand it completely, because that's what I'm trying to do as well. So that's fantastic. You said this, and I like it, and I think it's really important, and I want to unpack it a little bit. You say that leaders are appointed and anointed only by their peers and followers. This is interesting. So a military guy saying this, I thought it was all about rank, Dave. So
Right.
no, it's about you're appointed and anointed only by peers and followers. What does that mean?
So kind of backwards, forwards. So late in my career, one of the responsibilities of senior non-commissioned officers, and especially chiefs, is to raise the young officers, right? keep them out of trouble. And in the Navy, you can't even go talk to the boss without a senior NCO next to you when you're.
Oh, we took care of our chiefs, believe me,
Yeah.
because they took care of us.
Right, exactly. And that's the way, that's kind of the way it is. But some of that comes to my exposure to the civilian world, and some of that comes from being around some officers that got wayward and some senior non-commissioned officers that got wayward. And what I mean by that is that you can get a job, you can get a promotion, right? In the Navy, it's a big deal to make chief. I mean, they give you a brand new uniform, and there's a whole, that's a week-long event. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
Well, that can go to your head, right?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you can start tapping your anchors and saying, well, I'm a chief, right? But being a chief doesn't make you a leader. The people, when your people are going, that's my chief, that's my colonel, that's my captain. When people are doing that, they're anointing you as a leader because they trust you. You've developed those relationships that go along with those type of things. And there's a level of respect that is earned. There's respect that's implied, and there's respect that's earned.
Yeah.
That earned respect is what anoints you as being a leader. And you can't get that from looking in the mirror or tapping on your rank or looking at your job title or whatever your signature block is in an email. You don't get it from that. You get it from the acknowledgement of your peers and your followers that you're somebody that they trust, either to go to the fight with or to lead them through, budget time in the organization, whatever it is. You need to be that guy or that gal to do that. And so I used to tell people, 80, especially the young officers, 80% of the promotions you'll get in the United States Air Force, you'll be pushed up by 80%. The other 20 you're pulled up. So spend about that amount of time taking care of that badge. Because if you take care of your followers at the right level, not only will they tell people that you're a leader, they'll help you be a better leader, and they'll push you on to the next leadership opportunity.
Yeah, that's just so powerful, so important. And I think that especially what I write about is in business leaders, people who are individual contributors, they get promoted to manager, and then some just kind of, they take that power and it goes to their head, and they become this, look, I've got the title now, I'm going to tell you what to do type of thing. And as you mentioned, wayward junior officers, I saw a lot of wayward managers in my time in corporate that took the position to their heads, and nope, at the end of the day, nobody followed them because they just didn't respect that individual,
Right.
And so you earn that respect by doing your job, doing it very well, and taking care of the people around you, and as I mentioned earlier, shutting up and listening and and observing. Especially as a junior officer, I learned very, very early on to keep my mouth shut and do a lot of listening and asking clarifying questions.
Sure. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So there's a ton of lessons. This book is filled with stories, filled with lessons, and so I want to talk about a few of them, and then maybe have you share some of the stories in the book.
Sure.
But one of the ones you had was you said you need to listen. I'll ask you, what does it mean to listen on a 3x5 note card? I like that one. That was a little bit unique to this book. So what do you mean by listen with a 3x5 note card?
So I was lucky enough to be hand selected to go start the unmanned aerial vehicle program for the Air Force out in Indian Springs. And it was a pretty dynamic environment because all of the support staff, medics and admin staff, all of the support functions that were coming in there were all kind of handpicked by functional managers to, they wanted to make sure that worked right. But the Air Force put every permanently disqualified pilot and some old F4 maintainers, they threw them all in this mix. So we had this disgruntled group, and we had this high-speed group that was all together. And we all had a lot of good ideas, but as we're creating things on legal pads, we're writing tech orders on legal pads. As we're creating things, everybody had ideas. And I was young and full of ideas, and there was a reason I was there. There was a reason why all of us were there. We had accomplished some things in our career up to that point. And I would go to these meetings, and I would just get going. I was just laying it out, and I had it all done. And one time I left the meeting and I was feeling big and bold, boy, I had told them. And my E8 at the time, he kind of grabbed me and he goes, you know what he says, Dave? He goes, you're really smart and you have a lot of good ideas. And all of them are going to go right down the toilet until you learn how to shut your mouth.
Mm,
He said, because other people have good ideas. And if you stop talking, they'll probably take your good idea, make it a little bit better, and then we can
yes.
move on.
Yes.
And so to this day, I even ran into a high school teacher that wrote on my report card that I talk too much. I said, you nailed it. So it's good. But at that point, at that moment in time, I went back to my office. I took out a 3x5 card, and in block letters, I wrote the word listen on it. And I stuffed it in my front left-hand pocket. And for a long time, I would take anything that was important. I would take it with me to do, to touch or to pull out and to look at when I really wanted to transmit and I needed to be in the other form of communication, which was listening. And so some people will tell you I still get distracted, but I am a lot better at it today. And I still think I stink. So it's one of the, it's the most poorly practiced communication skill that we have.
Yeah.
And people will say, well, I think I'm a good listener. And I'll say, go ask the people that you work for. And 9 times out of 10, they come back and they go, oh, I got some work to do.
Yeah.
And yeah. Because if you can master that skill, boy, the respect you get from your work, from your followers.
You're right on. You're right on with that. I know, I've talked on this podcast before, my first, I was 32 when I got my first manufacturing plant. And I remember thinking I had to have all the answers, and it was a bit intimidating because I had people that were working at that plant that had been there almost 30 years, So, and I remember thinking, well, I have to have all the answers. And it over time and leading that plant, I learned that all the knowledge that I needed to run that business was in the minds of my employees, but I had to ask them, and I had to listen, and I had to be quiet and be humble enough to let those ideas flow. And of course, as a leader, you have to make the final decision. But at the end of the day, man, what I learned is when I shut up and I let them speak, is that there was this rich, and it was a lot of pent up ideas. Like the other management team wouldn't listen. So when they finally had a boss that was going to shut this, just said, tell me what you think would work in this scenario. They were like, it just all came out because it was all pent up. And I mean, so many great ideas, and none of them came from me. And that's the one thing. And the other thing is I learned is that the quietest person in the room usually has the best idea because they're thinking while the rest of the people are talking. And so I'm always careful now to always look for that like person that's not really talking too much. And usually they'll say one thing that just changes the whole dynamic of the room. So yeah, I think listening and is essential to leadership. And I'm glad you brought that up.
You had 2 really good ones there. One is minding your introverts.
Yes.
Because they get run over by the extroverts.
Yes.
And the second thing is that deference to expertise.
Yeah.
That has to be a core value in some institutions. I mean, we pick integrity and we pick all these. I think deference to expertise is the highest level of respect you can pay to anybody.
I agree. And even now that I'm kind of an expert in a lot of different areas, especially in my industry, I've been doing it for a long time. I'll actually let the young engineers run with something, even though I kind of know that's probably not the right idea, but I want them to make the mistake and I want them to try it. And I want them to feel like it's their idea. So as I've gotten older, it's been a little bit more like, I'm kind of the expert in this one, but I'm going to let it go because I want to see where this individual is going to take it. So it's part of it is just, you, even if you are the expert, sometimes it's good to hear what other people are thinking, and it's good to let them try their idea, because they own it. Once they say this is my idea and I get a chance to try it, they have the ownership. It's not my monkey, it's their monkey now. So
right.
Yeah,
That's
that's great about that. So
perfect.
So let's see. One of the things I really like, and you and I think alike in this, is you said, do the best job in the job you're in. Stop looking up, aspire, but don't desire. And this is a source of frustration to me. I saw so many people in corporate planning and thinking and acting so they could get their next job versus doing the job that they had very well. So talk about that in what you wrote about.
And they want the checklist, right?
Yeah.
When I made E9, if somebody tapped me on the shoulder one more time and said, how did you make chief? You know what my answer would be? I turned around and I said, I did the best job in the job I was in. And then the next promotion and the next job came after that. But I watched my peers, sadly. I watched some peers that I came up through the Air Force with, and the community gets really thin when you get into those command billets
Oh,
because
yeah.
there's not a lot of us. And I watched people start to have a desire to be the next thing instead of aspiring to that, instead of doing the work that went along with that. You could just see them say, that's where I want to be. And then they got into this. First of all, their personalities changed, the way they dressed changed. They weren't the same people that I knew. They stopped having fun, and they were doing things that were not natural for them. They thought that they had mastered over, and they did. It's just like somebody that doesn't play golf very well. And then they go out on the course and they think, oh yeah, I've got them all fooled. And because you're in the woods and you're on 10 strokes on one hole. And
Yep.
everybody's like, this guy can't play golf. It doesn't matter what type of facade. It doesn't matter how you dress or if you got the best clubs. If you show up and you can't play, you probably weren't doing the work.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I wrote that chapter. That chapter is for those young millennials, because the young millennials, when you're leading them, they're always looking 2 or 3 jobs ahead and going, well, I want to be that guy. And how much does he make? And I always tell them, stop, because the only way to get 5 years experience doing something is you have to do it for 5 years. There's no accelerated plan.
Right. Right.
So why don't you just knock it out of the park where you're at? People will notice you, even the introverts. People will notice you, and they'll advance you along because of the hard work you're doing. So it almost ties back to the don't get wrapped around your title and your rank, right? It's all kind of in there.
Yeah.
And it's
Absolutely.
keeping it real and staying humble. And
Yeah. And I would say this to anyone's listening and say, well, I don't believe in that. I got to keep looking to the next level. I got to keep acting like that next level. Is that my entire career, my wife said, is I was dragged kicking and screaming up the corporate ladder. Like I never desired for anything other than to do my job really well. And I kept getting more and more responsibility. And I spent most of my career as a vice president, general manager of businesses, and coming from like really no background. And I don't have a family that was, business leaders or anything like that. It's just that I did my job well, and I worked really hard, and I took care of my people, and I carried out the mission. And really people will notice, and people saw, like, Rennie gets things done, and you built a reputation for someone who's getting things done. And then they gave me more and more responsibility. So I think I'm living proof that it does work that way.
right. And people give you pieces and parts of their job. You don't even realize it. They're grooming you. They're taking something they do and giving it to you. And then when you get up there, you're like, oh, I already do that,
Right.
So,
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I love that. So, because I really do believe in that. I see way too many people thinking about the next job and not doing the current job really well. So the next question, don't hoard your grits. I love that one. So what do you mean by that?
Well, grits and gifts, right?
Yeah.
It's all kind of molds together. And it goes back to what I was talking about. There's some things that disturbed me, that made me write a few things. And one of them was, knowledge is power only when shared. And sometimes what happens is you get a nugget, and then somebody's like, well, I'm not going to share this. I've been working really hard to get this nugget.
Yeah.
And I think that they have the power structure upside down. And so you gotta share. You have to share when you get something. That is one thing, John, that it's been really easy for me my whole life. I get something and I'm like, hey, let's look at this, and sometimes I've been burned. I've had people run off and go, hey, look at this. And all of a sudden it's their idea, and it's going. I had a general one time. This guy was brilliant when he did this. We would have some intimate conversations, and he would write notes while I was talking sometimes. And he looked up at me one day and he goes, Chief, we're going to walk out of this room, and I'm going to say some of these things that I've written down here. And he goes, unfortunately, they have to be my ideas, and I hope you're okay with that.
Yes. Yeah.
And I told him, yes. I said, I'm absolutely fine with that. It's for the betterment of the masses, the growth of the followers. And that's how you build respect. Far too often you get into a room, somebody's holding a nugget, a guy's giving a briefing, or he's trying to solve a problem. And then the non-giver in the back of the room goes, well, that can't be right because X equals X and X and Y. And it blows the whole thing up. And you're like, well, why didn't you we've talked about this 10 times. Why didn't you tell me that?
Yeah.
And that is so destructive to an organization, but it also kills your followers, right? When
Yeah.
people see that, then all of a sudden they'll run and hide and they won't participate anymore because there's this unknown thing. And yeah, that's kind of deep. I don't know where you feel on that, but I just think the more you share, the better. Not everybody needs to know everything, but they definitely need to know as much as you can share appropriately.
Oh, I think it builds relationships. I mean, I think it's how you become a trusted boss. It's how you become a trusted peer, is if you're willing to share, you're not holding information tight to your vest. The worst bosses I ever saw in corporate were people they'd get a little nugget of information, they'd hold it tight because that was going to be their ticket to the next level, or their ticket to look good in front of the boss or whatever. And I've never been that way. I've always been like, this is going to help the overall business. Why would I hold this? I'll share it with even a competitive division or a competitive plant within my division, because I want them, because if they improve, we all, we improve the whole division. So why would I hold back on some of this stuff? But I saw some some of my peers that would they get an idea and they'd hold it tight and they'd hide it because they thought it was their little competitive advantage.
For your corporate audience, if you watch the Netflix stuff on the Boeing disaster with the 737 MAX, that was going on.
Yeah,
that was
exactly.
That was a big part of that failure.
Yeah. There's a lot of CYA. There's a lot of I know something that's going to help me, move up my career. It's compartmentalization, where, I've got my little kingdom. I'm going to take care of my kingdom, make sure I get budget for next year. Yeah. I saw a lot of that, and it's very destructive, and it does not help the company advance. And in fact, it hurts the company.
Now it takes a little courage to do that. If that's not normal for you, you've got to step out there and be a little vulnerable with it. But yeah,
wow, that's great. And so I was gonna say, maybe tell us another story from the book that's kind of uniquely you, because I picked a few, but there's so many in here.
The one that I think resonates the most with people that I've gotten feedback on. I'm working on a second book, and it may center around this. A quick story. I'll make it as quick as I can. When I was getting ready to go to Iraq for my last combat tour, I was going to be the chief of the trauma center for the whole theater of Iraq. That's a moving and shaking place. There's a lot going on. Helicopters are landing and everything's on it. Everything from 4-month-old children to our men and women in arms and families, and even the terrorists. And we took care of everybody. When you're going in there and you got over 200 some odd people that you got to get to mesh and make all of that work, and get to things, I had to think really hard. How do you do that? How do you create an attitude where it's a positive attitude, it's a good attitude, get wrapped around an idea that can carry people through day to day? And so I came up with two things. One was, I hate doing push-ups, John. I hate them. So I said, I'm going to do push-ups while I'm gone, and everybody's going to do them with me. And the second thing was something to key off of attitude. And so early on, when I'd walk into work, my days were 16 to 18-hour days. When I'd walk into the trauma center, we had a chaplain there 24 hours a day. So I'd get on my knees, literally on my knees, and I'd have them pray on me. And I learned really quick that one day it would be a rabbi, and the next day it would be a Baptist minister, and the next day
the military
priest. They all say the same words, and the feeling is the same, and it's all good stuff. So that was number one. And then number two is usually I would stop in the command section. So it was mainly our administrative people. And we'd started with 5 push-ups. I said, we're going to do 5 push-ups, and we'd do 5 push-ups. And then there was always the question of, Chief, how are you doing today? And I would say maximum fabulous. And they'd say, what? And I'd say, that is the top of the rung of attitude that you can have in the entire planet. It's maximum fabulous. And I said, if I'm not there right now, by the end of the day, that's where I'm going to be. And I said, you should be too. And so this went on for months. Push-ups, I do about 140 to 160 push-ups by the time I was done seeing everybody. The question was always the same: Chief, how you doing? Maximum fabulous. They would all laugh. They would say, how do you get to max fab? I said, you just got to work on it. There's no reason not to be that way.
Yeah.
So when I was going to leave, the boss asked me, he says, well, what do you want? And I told him I wanted one of the American flags at a Heroes Highway. And our survival rate through that whole conflict in the time that I was there, if you were breathing and you hit our hospital, you had a 99.5% chance of going home alive. And that's pretty good. And so, you'd think that Max Fab contributed to that. They took the Red Cross, Red Crescent flag off of the top of the hospital. That's mandatory by Geneva Convention to fly over the medical facilities. They took that down. They gave it to me, and it's in my garage. I see it every day when I park, and they embroidered my name on it and the time that I was there. But on the bottom of that flag, it says Maximum Fabulous.
I love it.
And so I think I went back and visited some of those folks in San Antonio when I got back, and they picked me up and kind of gave me a little VIP treatment. And I think that a lot of them attribute their ability to survive mentally through that, through just a couple of push-ups and working towards maximum fab every day. So, and the people that have read the book, they write me emails now and they sign them Max Fab. So it's good.
I love that story, and that's why I wanted to hear. And I'm glad that you told it, because leaders, our attitude is contagious. If we're down in the dumps, everyone's going to be down in the dumps. And if you come in and you're max fab every day, or at least trying to get there, right? Then that attitude's going to, it's going to catch on, and that's a powerful story. And there's lives saved because of that, and that's great to hear. Yeah, that's great to hear. Well, Dave, this has been fantastic. How can our listeners find out more about your new book and more about you?
Sure. Well, read the book. It's on Amazon. It's on Barnes and Noble and Balboa Press. So yeah, go out and check out the book. They can get a hold of me at Dave Nordell on Twitter is probably the best way to get a hold of me. And we can have some wonderful conversations on there. I do have a website. I speak professionally to do some of this motivational stuff and talk a little Max Fab and talk a little bit of attitude and do some motivational things. And obviously the coaching things that go along with people that feel like they may just need a little bit of a different flavor from somebody that's had a little bit different experience and those type of things. So yeah, really the easiest way, most people are on Twitter at Dave Nordell on Twitter. And then my website is one man, one plan MT for Montana.com. One man, one plan, MT as in Mike Tango.com. I'm up here in Billings, Montana, and it's gorgeous country and gorgeous people. And they named a ship after our city. So we've got the Navy. The Navy's got a USS Billings now. So it's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm just here to give back, John. So if people need me, have me holler and please take time to read the book. It's a quick read, as you know. So, and I think it's helpful.
Absolutely. So we'll put links in the show notes for those resources. And, again, leaders, I encourage you to take a look at it. It's called Giving Back, Life and Leadership from the Farm to the Combat Zone and Beyond. There's a lot of great stories in it. We just scratched the surface. Dave, thank you for coming on the show and sharing all your experiences and all this wisdom. I really appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks so much, John.
Thanks again. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.